Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, monsieur, dame. This morning I tabled my private member's bill, the Elimination of Partisan Government Advertising Act. It amends the Auditor General Act to appoint an advertising commissioner to oversee government spending on advertising. I have heard from countless Canadians who are concerned with the wasteful advertising spending by the Harper Conservatives. It's time to bring Canada's advertising rules into the 21st century. The appointment of an advertising commissioner, as in other jurisdictions, will provide accountability for all Canadians. This legislation will apply to all future governments of any political stripe. From 2006 to 2012, the government spent $548.6 million on advertising. It is expected that for the fiscal years ending 2013 and 2014, that an additional $121 million will be spent. The total, almost $670 million since taking office. That is an extraordinary amount of money. It's important to note that my bill applies to all forms of advertising: print, radio, television, internet, and billboards. My bill, of course, only serves to put in place a mechanism to stop partisan advertising. As in Ontario, public service announcements and other essential government advertising will not be affected. J'ai déposé ce matin mon projet de loi intitulé « Loi visant à éliminer la publicité gouvernementale partisane ». Ce projet de loi prévoit modifier la loi sur le vérificateur général et vise la nomination d'un commissaire à la publicité, chargé de surveiller les dépenses publicitaires du gouvernement. J'ai entendu une multitude de Canadiens déplorer le gaspillage que représentent les dépenses publicitaires des conservateurs de Stephen Harper. Il est temps que le Canada ait des règles sur la publicité qui soient dignes du 21e siècle. La nomination d'un commissaire à la publicité, une procédure déjà en place à divers endroits, amènera le gouvernement à rendre des comptes aux Canadiens. La loi s'appliquera à tous les futurs gouvernements, quelle que soit leur allégeance. De 2006 à 2012, le gouvernement a dépensé 548,6 millions de dollars en publicité. On estime que pour les exercices se terminant en 2013 et 2014, 121 millions de dollars s'ajouteront à cette somme. C'est près de 670 millions de dollars depuis son arrivée au pouvoir. Cela est une somme d'argent extraordinaire. Le projet de loi servira à mettre en place un mécanisme éliminant la publicité partisane, comme c'est déjà le cas en Ontario, les messages d'intérêt public et d'autres communications essentielles du gouvernement ne seront pas concernés. According to the government's annual advertising reports and recent cabinet approvals, the Conservatives have spent over $113 million on economic action plan ads alone since 2009. Some particularly egregious examples: shrink-wrapped transit vehicles in downtown Toronto, 9,000 billboards across Canada, many of which are now being used for target practice by aspiring young Canadian hockey players. These billboards were made mandatory. The cities were forced to pay for them. My city of Ottawa, for example, as a condition of receiving federal infrastructure money, was forced to install 91 billboards. The cost? About $500 each, for a total of over $45,000. We've witnessed incredibly expensive ads: NHL playoffs, the Super Bowl, unprecedented in Canadian history. Each single ad spot on CBC's Hockey Night in Canada is estimated to cost taxpayers about $95,000. Now, let me put this in context for Canadians. Choosing a number, say, of $60 million. Here's what we could do for the Canadian people. We could fund any one of the following. $60 million provides 30 MRI machines, 1,000 registered nurses' salaries for 1 year, 20,000 hip, knee, and cataract surgeries, or 8,500 insulin pumps for our kids coping with type 1 diabetes. $60 million buys 600 affordable housing units, or it buys 2 million passes for seniors on pensions, or it pays the tuition fees for 10,000 students. Or again, imagine it provides 30,000 doses of life-saving chemotherapy drugs for Canadians fighting cancer. Ladies and gentlemen, Monsieur Dame, every member of Parliament from every party, including government members, cannot look their constituents in the eyes and justify this spending. I'm calling on my colleagues from all sides of the House to support this bill and work with me to eliminate partisan government advertising once and for all. Thank you very much. I welcome your questions. Merci beaucoup.
David, I'm just wondering, you're talking about spending there on the latter part of your address. Is the issue the partisan nature of advertising or the amount of advertising?
It's both. We've seen a dramatic increase in partisan advertising spending by this particular government. And I think many of the Conservative caucus members are deeply, deeply troubled by this and embarrassed by it. The amounts have been increasing because it's unchecked. It's unfettered. It goes through no filter other than what the PMO wants to run. So the whole idea here is to put in place a check and balance, not just for this government, for every government going forward, to make sure that partisanship is removed from that kind of spending, because I think it's what Canadians want and that's what they deserve.
Ontario has legislation, I gather, that may be similar to what you're proposing. Was it a model, and what other provinces have this kind of legislation?
Ontario is the groundbreaking jurisdiction for all of North America, and for that matter, for the world. I looked at that model very closely. I looked at the examples in Australia and some of the emerging models in American states, and possibly even going forward in New Zealand. There's a movement afoot internationally to make sure that this kind of spending is kept in check. The Ontario model, from my research, appears to be working quite well. Most Canadians, or Ontarians at least, will see ads about, say, good things growing in Ontario and buying Foodland products in Ontario, but they will not see glossy, extraordinarily expensive ads, people walking down beaches telling Canadians that all is right with the world and that the Canadian economy is soaring because Mr. Harper's party is telling you so, or his government's telling you so. Most people are really offended by this. Most sports fans, watching NHL games are offended by this because they know it's their money. And what I'm trying to illustrate here is, look, it's the quantum, but it's also, going back to your first question, it's also what we could be doing with this money. All the important demands and needs in Canadian society that we hear about on a daily basis. And it's really, really hard. In fact, I think it's impossible now to justify this.
There's no other Canadian province that has this kind of legislation.
No, that's right. They're not, but I know that other provinces are looking at the Ontario model closely. There have been a lot of complaints recently, I understand, in British Columbia.
Seeing as I'm guessing this advertising commissioner isn't going to be a volunteer position, that would mean that this bill would require some kind of a royal recommendation. Have you started working on that? Or?
I have, and it doesn't necessarily require that. It would be up to the Auditor General in selecting someone for that office. It might be an existing member of the Auditor General's staff. You know, the government's spending an awful lot of time right now in their budget streamlining positions, eliminating a lot of jobs. If they really seem to be very good at that, well, here's a challenge for the government. Find a position that exists in the Auditor General's office right now and make it the advertising commissioner's job going forward. I do put in the bill a very objective arm's length selection method spearheaded by the Auditor General. There is a precedent. The Commissioner for Sustainable Environment Development is chosen generally through a panel with recommendations to the AG. I think we should be looking at that model to make this possible. I look forward to hearing what the government has to say. I've talked to a lot of colleagues on all sides of the House about the advertising issue, and the bottom line now is it's really difficult. I think it's a point of unison, in fact. Every MP I've talked to has said this is really difficult to justify.
I wanted to explore that. Private members' bills, as you know, can be long shots. do you have your ducks in order with, in particular, the conservative backbench? Are you getting support?
Look, we've just tabled the bill. You can't really discuss the merits or details of the bill. It's secret until you table it. I'm very hopeful. I think it's going to be, frankly, I think it's going to be difficult for any MP, as I said in my remarks, to walk down a shopping mall or meet folks in a town hall or go to an auction and say to them that they're against the idea of getting government advertising spending under control. I just can't see a single member of Parliament defending this from any side of the House. And as I said earlier, I've had a number of Conservative MPs quietly express deep embarrassment about the way this is happening. Now, I would say that there is a linkage here in my mind. When I first began working on this, I began reflecting back on Mr. Harper's time before politics, when as the head of the National Citizens Coalition, he took litigation to the Supreme Court of Canada to try and exempt political parties from spending, and for that matter, third parties, from spending unlimited amounts of money on advertising during political campaigns and beyond. And then I began reflecting why it was Mr. Harper was doing this. Mr. Harper, who purports to be a small c conservative, responsible with taxpayers' money. We've seen him all this week, particularly yesterday, get up and herald his responsible approach to taxpayers' money. If you haven't paid it back, then you should have paid it back. I don't know how he squares that with the kind of largesse here, the kind of spending that he's put into this. Maybe this is the way that Mr. Harper is using to circumvent spending rules. Maybe he's using public resources to further his own government's chances for political success. I think Canadians know that. I think they feel it. And I'll tell you stop anybody coming out of a bus or getting off a train or getting off the 401 or somewhere else, Trans-Canada Highway, and ask them what they think of these ads, and I'll tell you, they're very offended.
Just kind of playing devil's advocate. The government went on at length about how these ads have created economic or consumer confidence and have been bolstering the economy, and so therefore they're not really partisan. And I just kind of wanted your kind of take on that.
Well, for a government to say that this is messaging out to assuage fear or to condition people's views of where we are as a country, there really is another word for that. It's called propaganda. And it has been seen for many, many years now by many, many people, many different quarters, as propaganda. It's using public tax dollars, our hard-earned tax dollars, contributed by the Canadian population, for really, for partisan advancement. It's to tell everybody that all is right with the world, that this particular government has got everything under control. Canadians are much, much smarter than that. And as I say, everywhere I go, people tell me how deeply offended they are by this. Because they know in their daily lives that there are some really important issues that we're not tackling as a country. They're immediate issues. As I said, they speak to things like waiting times in surgical lineups. They speak to things like, will my 23-year-old new graduate from college or apprenticeship get an opportunity to get an apprenticeship or get a first job for a year or two? There are some really important needs in Canadian society, and I've tried to highlight that here. It's not just about saying it's bad because of the quantum or that they're spending money on ads. No, it's because there are so many competing demands. And, governments make choices with tax dollars, and it reflects, I think, on their character. In this case, I think it reflects badly on the character of the Conservatives, and it reflects badly on democracy, on our institutions. I think Canadians deserve, and I think they want, and I think they deserve better.
In the absence of, if I'm not mistaken, I think your leader, Mr. Trudeau, has mused about this as possible Liberal policy. In the absence of this private member's bill going forward, do you know, is this party policy?
Look, I'm going to work as a private member. I'm going to work through my caucus, work through all caucuses on all sides of the House to try to get support for this. I can tell you at first blush, I have indicated to my colleagues in the past a general concern, and it has been met with unbelievable support. They haven't seen the bill. They're looking at it now. And as I say, right across the House, there's not a single member of Parliament yet I have to speak to privately or in the halls or at a meeting asking about this that isn't offended or frankly embarrassed by it. So I'm really hopeful. I'm confident, but I'm really hopeful that we can get support and get this through. It's the right thing to do. It's 2013. The government says it's looking for ways to save money and trim the budget. Mr. Flaherty says he's on target for deficit elimination. We'll see about that. But this is certainly one way to indicate to Canadians that we're serious as parliamentarians to get spending under control on behalf of Canadian taxpayers. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.